The winter meetings have come and gone, and the Mariners did absolutely nothing once again. A little throwback to last year's winter meetings here. But they did apparently have conversations with the Boston Red Sox about trading Luis Castillo for Tristan Casas. Sounds like that deal might be dead, but Joe and I are going to talk about the possibility that Castillo could be getting traded more so than we thought, because apparently it's starting to pick up steam. We'll also talk about the Mariners making a big pitch to free agent starting pitcher Roki Sasaki, and we'll wrap it all up by talking about that third draft pick that the Mariners got in the draft lottery the other night. Picking at number 3 is huge for this team. I can't wait to see what they do with it. We'll talk about that as well. Thank you guys so much for watching episode 147 of the Hit It Here podcast, part of the Bleav network available on all your favorite podcasting platforms. Be sure to give us a 5-star review, like and subscribe to this YouTube channel, and this is the Brandon Oldenburg episode of the podcast, and I am here with Joe. Joe, how are you?
Episode. So close to a perfect intro, man. You PSA 9 intro right there. I'm feeling good. We had a pretty big live stream on Mariner Mojo a couple hours ago. That was a lot of fun. Good to be back live when there's actual news to kind of talk about and just talk with the community about what's going on, where people's heads are at and stuff like that. You also streamed on MLB Mojo. Go subscribe to MLB Mojo if you guys aren't already. Gonna try and flesh that out a little bit more, but we've said that before. Yeah, feeling good. It's the off season feels like it's starting to take a little bit more shape, but I think that's another thing that we've said numerous times. I think that realistically, the thing that comes as the most surprise that I'm probably the most excited for in the long term is the fact that the Mariners got the 3rd overall pick in the draft. That's nuts. That they were the second worst odds to get the first pick. I think they had a 1.6% chance or something like that to get in the top 5. Maybe that's not accurate, but I think it was something like that. And they end up with the 3rd overall pick. That just in terms of just draft capital, as far as slot money, the Mariners they're feeling good. And they also got that compensatory round, the comp pick at the end, around the mid 30s as well. Their draft stock has risen a ton. And the way that they've been able to draft recently and how well they've done and how well their draft and development has gone, and the fact that Scott Hunter's still with the organization, I have a lot of high hopes that they're not going to miss with that number 3 pick. Now, the Mariners do have some history with the number 3 pick. And Lord heaven above, I hope they don't get a Jeff Clement. You know what I mean? The fact that the best player out of their 3, it was Jeff Clement, I can't remember the second one, and then it was Mike Zunino. I'm going to need whoever they draft at number 3 to be better than that. But my money is on the fact that this scouting team is better than it was back then. I would place some money on it. And for whatever reason, if there are some scouting directors to bet money on, Scott Hunter would be the one to do it. But you can find actual tangible bets with BetOnline.
Thank you to BetOnline for being a sponsor for the Hit It Here podcast. Juan Soto is officially off of the free agent market, meaning the hot stove, it's pretty hot. Other players are going to be signing here pretty soon, probably because the dominoes are going to start to fall. Which team's going to sign Roki Sasaki? Well, you can take the Mariners at plus 1,000 with BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. They have the largest selection of odds on everything from football, the NBA, college basketball, NHL, UFC, you name it. BetOnline has you covered, and head there today. And don't forget to use promo code Bleav, that's BLEAV, for your welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline. The game starts here. Twitter was in a flurry, absolute chaos, when we sat down and joined call to maybe start recording this episode of the podcast. Turns out we're 2.5 hours later now, because as soon as we sat down, it's hey, whoa, the Red Sox just traded for Garrett Crochet. They're not done. They're in conversation with the Mariners on one of their starting pitchers. The likely of that scenario being Luis Castillo, and as kind of that time went on, about the next hour and a half, Castillo, it was very obvious that he is being shopped. He is being made available on the trade block, but they're a little bit more hesitant to trade Gilbert, Kirby, Miller, Wu, things that we already knew, given the control, the cost, and just how much more expensive Luis Castillo is. What, do you think I was going to go for a bar?
Dude, you had bars there for a second.
I know, Wu knew, a slew of news. Whoa. Yeah, I think Castillo is obviously the one that makes the most sense. We talked about it a ton. Obviously, the Red Sox, there are some players that names are being thrown around, if it's Masataka Yoshida and like some lower prospects, if it's Masataka Yoshida and Wilyer Abreu, or the one that I think a lot of people latched onto right away, and that was actually being reported of potential, was Tristan Casas. Now, I'm of the camp that I think a 1-for-1 Castillo for Casas is closer than I think a lot of people are making it out to be. I think what you're getting out of Castillo from a pitcher's market standpoint of how elevated the pitcher's market is, and that's something that Divish kind of reiterated, was like, hey, this pitcher's up market, it's flying high right now. The Mariners may make a chance to try and like capitalize on that. The fact that Castillo is going to be making $2 million more than Luis Severino should tell you exactly where the pitching market's at. Same thing with like Nate Eovaldi getting $25 million. He's 3 years older than Castillo. Like, there's something to be had there. Obviously, Tristan Casas is a club-controlled first baseman that has shown promise, potential to be a 3-win player at first base with below-average defense, meaning his offensive value is very, very high. Mariners fans think Castillo is worth more than Casas. Red Sox fans think Casas is worth more than Castillo. I think it's closer to a 1-to-1 than Colton does, but Colton, what are your thoughts on that initial trade kind of like coming into frame?
Yeah, I mean, Castillo for Casas 1-for-1. I do think the Mariners need to get more in that deal. And I kind of laid it out a little bit on Twitter. Castillo, and I think a lot of people that are watching this are going to agree with that because we're Mariners fans, and obviously Red Sox fans are going to disagree. But Luis Castillo, I mean, he's been a workhorse. He throws 170 plus innings every single year. He is making below market value right now, clearly. I mean, we said, I think last podcast, that if Castillo was a free agent, he would get 25. I think it's closer to 30, like I said before. Because if Eovaldi got 25, I think Castillo gets more than that. And so, maybe it's 27, 28, but still, Luis Castillo is being severely undervalued. I think that Tristan Casas is a guy who, when he's healthy, sure, he's been a great player for the Red Sox, but he can't seem to stay healthy. He averages 70 games a year. He's not great defensively. Is he? I mean, he'd be your first baseman, but realistically, is he just a glorified DH? Like, I don't know if he's that bad defensively, but I just think that a trade of Luis Castillo for Tristan Casas, it makes sense in the terms that both teams need what the other has. And the Mariners would save money in this deal, of course. However, then they have to go out and find a way to fill that starter spot, because you can't just go out there with the 4 stars you have in Emerson Hancock and call it good. It's just not acceptable. And so, okay, they created a hole for themselves. Now they have to go try to fill that. Is it worth it in that regard? Or do you just go out and sign Carlos Santana, which is allegedly they're trying to get done over the next couple of days, to sign Carlos Santana, put him at first base, and then just roll with the starting 5 you have? I honestly think I'd rather do that than just trade for just Castillo for Casas straight up. If you can get another team or another player involved there, whether that be like a Vaughn Grisham or David Hamilton or whatever his name was.
Sure, second baseman.
I think that's fine. I think that's a fine deal to go about and make if you feel confident in your ability to go out there and sign another starting pitcher.
The thing, like, with how much money you'd be clearing by trading Castillo, I mean, you're clearing up $24 million, which, if you add that to the 16 existing that the Mariners say they have to spend, $40 million to fill out, what at that point, a number 5 starting pitcher and potentially someone at third base. I think you can get that done. I really do. I really do think that's possible. Do I think that the Red Sox would want more for just Casas, given how expensive Castillo is, as far as just like money that's going onto their books, and then also how much control Casas has? He's not a free agent until what, 2029? Like, that's a good amount of control. He's still very cost controlled, and with how little service time he actually has, his first year of arbitration might not actually be as expensive as like maybe we're like hoping it to be, or you know, like expecting it to be. Not hoping, that'd be a good thing. I've in my head expanded it one piece to like one more piece each of Tristan Casas and then their number 21 prospect Hunter Dobbins, who is a right-handed pitcher. He'd be MLB ready in 2025, could compete for that number 5 starting job with Emerson Hancock if they don't go out and sign someone. Trading Casas and him for Castillo and say you give them Ben Williamson. someone that then gives them a little bit more depth on one of the corners. They move Devers to first. I think that's something that maybe sways it a little bit more so that where people feel comfortable making that trade. But again, the way that it started and how it fizzled out makes it feel like to me like that trade doesn't get done. And I agree with you. I think that signing Santana, rolling out there with Castillo again next year, I think is better than what you'd get from the Red Sox. But it's not just the Red Sox that are interested in Luis Castillo, because Divish, after some of this, feels like the talks kind of fizzled out, made it very clear that the Cubs, the Phillies, and the Orioles, those are the three?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, Cubs,
Maybe
Phillies,
the Mets
Orioles.
as well.
I feel
Not
like
mentioned.
I remember Yankees for some reason, but I don't know if that's true or not. I could be very off base. That might have been a different one. That might have been Mike Deportes that said that. Regardless. Cubs, Phillies, Orioles, I think are the main three that we should take a look at here of like another suitor for Luis Castillo if obviously the Red Sox stuff does fall through. Because like if they don't want to give up Casas, I don't know if there's a trade avenue for the Mariners to get ultimately better in that scenario where like they take on Yoshida or they get like Wilyer Abreu and one of those second basemen. Like I don't know if that's necessarily worth it. Are there people or players within Cubs, Phillies, Orioles that make sense in this Luis Castillo trade sweepstakes?
Oh, absolutely. And we've talked a lot about Castillo for Bellinger being like a almost 1-for-1 deal. And at that point, I think the Mariners say no because Bellinger's a guy who's probably going to leave at the end of the year. And he's a guy who's making a little bit more money than Luis Castillo. And while he helps you at first base, absolutely, and you can put him in the middle of your lineup, and it's going to be a good addition to your lineup, I think that the value that Luis Castillo has, the Mariners are rightfully so asking for the world, as they should be. And I know that the Phillies wanted to give the Mariners Alec Boehm for like Logan Gilbert or something like that. I wouldn't even do Alec Boehm straight up for Luis Castillo.
Yeah.
I'd want more than that too. And so like there are certainly players that make sense. Targets, Alec Boehm, Cody Bellinger, Nico Horner. I mean, of course, I'll always say Jordan Westberg. Like there are certainly targets. It's just trying to. It's a very hard player to try to trade because he has the no trade clause. Is he willing to go to those teams? And are these teams willing to give you what he's going to be worth? Because he's going to be worth a lot. They're like you said, they're paying him only $2 million more than the Athletics paid friggin' Luis Severino. Like I think that because of that, his value is so much higher than people are making it out to be. And I think that while I don't think you can get like a Castillo for Westberg done,
No.
like 1-for-1, no shot. The Mariners have to throw in a decent amount more in that trade for a multitude of reasons. Like also the Orioles, we don't really know what kind of budget they're working with under their new ownership. But I mean, if they're talking about re-signing Burns, like who knows? I think that the easiest one to talk about here is the Cubs, and it is Bellinger and possibly Nico Horner, and maybe a bit of an extended trade because we did hear that there were trade talks going on with the Cubs and the Mariners and the White Sox for Garrett Crochet. Crochet's off the board now. And so, because the Mariners didn't want to trade one of their starting pitchers, they roped in the White Sox.
Yeah.
Well, now the Mariners might circle back and say, okay, we are willing to trade one of our starting pitchers in Luis Castillo. And by doing so, I think the guy they've talked about the most, and I could be wrong on this, but I think the guy that they have been the most interested in has been Nico Horner over Cody Bellinger. Would I do Castillo for Horner 1-for-1? I might. You're definitely saving a lot less money there than you would be trading for Tristan Casas, but I think that Horner fills a much more important position of need for you at second base. And he's a player that I think we all like quite a bit. He's still making 11 or whatever $million. I almost want to have the Cubs throw something else in there, nothing special, but I think that maybe that's getting a little too greedy. I could definitely see a realm of possibility where Castillo does go to the Cubs for Horner 1-for-1. Bellinger, I don't think that would be a 1-for-1 deal personally.
It's the money that's the big kicker for Bellinger. I think I inherently agree with the take about Nico Horner. The weird thing is people would say that Casas has more value than Nico Horner, and I don't 100% disagree with that because he's younger. I think has a bit more potential. But you look on a year-to-year basis, Horner's penciled in for like 3.5 wins pretty much every year because what he does not only offensively as a average speed guy, but also what he does defensively. It's much harder to accrue that much more value at the first base position compared to second base. And maybe that's where you lose that battle if you're Tristan Casas. Where he does win is his cost. And Nico Horner making almost $12 million, you're only saving half of what you're saving on the Castillo trade if like you're pivoting to Horner instead of Casas. Like, how does that really shape that out? I don't think asking for like another small piece is unrealistic. I don't know if it's like where are you thinking? Like in the top, like
I'd say like in like the
like 20 to 30 range?
Maybe 20 to 30. Yeah. I mean, it really would depend on the piece, and especially if the Mariners go after a pitcher in that regard, like they're good at this. I know you've heard me say that before. They're good at this, and if they see a guy they like, and they should get Tyson Miller.
You know, bring Tyson Miller back.
Brandon
Birdsell, the number 22 ranked prospect out of the Cubs organization, right-handed pitcher at a 3.91 ERA and 135 innings across AA and AAA last year. A little bit worse in AAA than AA, but like a 6'2" righty has got a 60 grade fastball. Like maybe they turn him into something. But like, is that really worth it at that end? Because like the $12 million that you gain, you're spending on probably a pitcher at that point. Or maybe the $16 million you already have existing, you're spending on a number 5, given how the starting pitching market looks like. If Frankie Montas is getting 17, like you're getting a worse pitcher than Frankie Montas to be your number 5. Like that's not terrible. I'd take Frankie Montas as my number 5. It's just like, it's an expensive 5. It's like, how do they go about allocating those funds? Like, so you get Nico Horner, say you sign Carlos Santana. So we'll say for what, 8 million?
Sure.
Or are we saying 10? Right. 8?
Coming off a Gold Glove, maybe 10. Coming 10? Off a Gold Glove,
sure.
Yeah.
So we trade Castillo for Nico Horner. You spend 12 of the saved. You spend 10 of the saved $12 million on Carlos Santana, meaning you got $18 million to go spend on a starting pitcher at that point. Because what you do with Nico Horner, you put them at second. You put him at second base. That moves that Dylan Moore, Ryan Bliss, whatever, to third. You leave that. You just let that be. You sign Santana to be with Luke Raley, and then you sign a starting pitcher. I think that if the Nico Horner thing goes down, that's where the rest of the offseason I think would play out. Who's available for $18 million if they choose to spend it all? It's hard to say. Like, given like what people are getting in free agency, like Yusei Kikuchi got a lot more than I think a lot of people expected him to. You're not going to get Jack Flaherty for $18 million in this market, I don't think. So, like, how does that shape out? It's tough to say. Is it more worth it just to keep Castillo at that point? I don't know. I don't disagree with Divish in the fact that he's saying the pitching market's elevated. I think it does make sense to strike while the iron's hot.
We talked about it a little bit. The biggest problem if the Mariners were to trade Luis Castillo is the fact that you're going to have an open starter spot, but you can remedy that. Instead of spending that $18 million, Joe, that we talked about the Mariners would have after the Horner trade, you don't use any of that, and instead you go sign Roki Sasaki, who apparently the Mariners have been planning for years, by the way, to make a major push for. And it's weird because this is something that hasn't really been... Now, keep in mind, the Mariners are very tight-lipped usually about everything in terms of trades, everything. But this is a trade or a signing that I think we all kind of thought at the beginning of the offseason was not going to happen for the Mariners. It made zero sense because they have a full starting 5. Why would he want to come here? He's going to go to the Dodgers. He's going to go to the Padres. And then Roki Sasaki's agent came out because he was not allowed to talk to teams or media in general until Sasaki was officially posted, which happened on Monday. So because of that, when he came out and said that he's not necessarily looking for a big market team, he's not necessarily looking for a team that has a mentor on it, which means the Padres. He's not necessarily looking for, he's looking at successive teams recently and what they can do for him and maybe a small market team. The Mariners fit that bill pretty well, and the Mariners are probably going to have Ichiro be a part of it. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing if he's not looking for a mentor, but if Ichiro is part of the recruiting process, that'll never hurt. The greatest Japanese player to ever play the game. Like, that will never hurt. It's going to be very interesting that the fact that the Mariners are even trying to make a push for Roki Sasaki is interesting. He will not sign more than likely until January 15th, which is when the 2025 international bonus pool money becomes available, at which point he can sign for the most money. The Mariners are tied for the most money, I think, with the Athletics in the international bonus pool. So, hey, if the Athletics are trying to go a little crazy Rama, maybe they go out there and try to sign Roki Sasaki. But Yeah, I think that the Mariners might be the team left at the altar here. I fully do not expect him to sign with the Mariners. I truly don't think that'll happen.
Yeah.
But it does feel, again, very similar to the Shohei Ohtani sweepstakes.
Where like they're in the fold, they feel like there's some sort of momentum going on, and then rug pull at the end kind of a thing. Yeah, it's like Jude laid it out, I think, in a Times article of just like that whole idea of like preparing for months, if not years. And it's like, where did this come from? But that also just like stems from the idea that you're saying like they've been tight-lipped about more so these kind of transactions versus other players that they were interested in around MLB. Like Justin Hollander made it abundantly clear when he was like, yeah, we've been interested in Jorge Polanco for years, kind of this thing when they acquired him. Like, this feels like the moment where they're now kind of like showing their hand, as opposed to in years past where like maybe they're just they're not playing it as close to their chest, I think. And they have been with Roki. It's just interesting how it's going to kind of play out, because I think everyone and their mother would have bet the Dodgers. And then when they signed Blake Snell, everyone's like, okay, the Padres then. So it's just interesting. And Daniel Kramer, said that the Mariners, according to like industry belief, right, around the league, that they're a long shot to sign Roki. Which is interesting, because if they're making this big push and whatever, is like that industry belief before that? Like, is that not taking into account the fact that they haven't really had a chance to sit down with him and like propose like, hey, we're a mid-market team that acts like a mid to like large, maybe above average market team as far as like money is concerned, as far as revenue, not payroll, that acts like a little bit of a smaller team. So the media is not going to be all around you all the time. We don't have like a current existing roster member that's going to be your quote unquote mentor. Sure, we've got a guy in Ichiro that's been around the league ever since he came to America in 2001, basically just been in or around the Mariners organization as much as he could be. Like, I don't know if that's going to be a deterrent. Like, that feels like a very positive thing, that he can be there, doesn't have to be, and you don't have to like be just like in his shadow. So I don't know. It's the thing that encourages me the most is the ability for the Mariners to develop young starting pitching. And if Roki Sasaki values his health, I think the fact that the Mariners have shown the ability to, one, take care of their young starting pitchers and have them show that they can be durable starting their career, that's a sign of confidence for me. Like, that would be a vote of confidence for me if I was Roki Sasaki. And the little bit of injury concern that he's had over in Japan, of like, how much is he really going to be able to like give you like 160, 170 innings every year? If the Mariners can, I mean, even that conversation, like it was the tail end of an article about like a 6-man rotation being a possibility. Regardless if they trade Castillo, they could still sign Sasaki and do a 6-man rotation. That then also lessens the blow of his innings. Like, that just makes his ability to stay healthier longer and then cash in a larger contract once his international minor league deal's up, because he's being posted earlier than he normally would be, because he just wants to come to the MLB. And he's like, hey, I'm out. Please get me to the MLB ASAP. As opposed to a guy like Yamamoto, who waited and got his big 10-year, $335 million contract or whatever it was. Sasaki's not going to sign that. He won't be able to sign something like that for a couple years until he is a free agent in like MLB's terms. So it's like, if he wants to stay healthy and pitch in a pitcher-friendly park along with a great development program for pitchers, the Mariners make sense in that regard. It's just, I think we're in very much so like cherry picking aspects, but that's what you do when like you're pitching, like why you're the best spot for him. Like, you have to pick what you're best at and show that even with a terrible offense for a large part of the year, you were still competitive. If we sign you, that'll allow us to make more flexible moves offensively with payroll. Should they go that way? Of course, that's not always a guarantee, but they could, because they'd have more money. We can make the offense better. And then we'd be a contender, because he talked, you mentioned he talked about like team success. Do we consider the Mariners successful the last like 4 years? It depends. I mean, it's the second most winningest period in franchise history. It's not a lot to write, it's not a high bar, but being one game out of the playoffs back-to-back years, you made the playoffs 2 years ago, like, you're right there. You're knocking on the door. If you can convince a potential generational talent, potentially the best arm to ever come out of Japan, to sign with you and be like, hey, we can make the offense better if you sign with us, we will be a contending team this year with a new coaching staff and obviously a hitting development program that showed life at the end of last year, like, there's reason for me to like have faith. And it might be blind faith, and I understand that. But this whole Roki Sasaki thing has gotten a lot more, I think, fleshed out for the Mariners than I ever expected it to this offseason. Because I thought it was Dodgers and done.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think that when it comes to where he's going to sign, he said that it doesn't matter about West Coast teams or whatnot. We heard that the White Sox are apparently preparing their pitch. Like, okay, you want to talk about team success? Let's look at the worst team in baseball history. I think that you laid it out pretty well, the merits of what the Seattle Mariners have to offer a pitcher of Roki Sasaki's caliber. He's a guy with a 100-mile-an-hour fastball and a devastating split finger. And because of that, he fits in really well with this pitching staff, which, if you remember correctly, they've all developed really good split fingers over the past, calendar year or something like that. We saw Logan's take another big step forward this year, which is one of the reasons why he was so dominant. And you get to work with Cal Raleigh as your catcher. Like, I mean, that can't be understated how important that is. I think that the Mariners are going to make their best pitch possible. I mean, they might use all of their international pool money to sign him, but he's going to be as a signing bonus. But otherwise, he's going to be on a minor league contract, so he'll be making the major league minimum when he was to come up, which is great for the Mariners. I Bleav that means so he would be with the Mariners for 6 years if they were to sign him into his age 29 season, and it would basically be like signing the number one minor league free agent in baseball, the number one minor league prospect in baseball. That's what it would be like. And the Mariners, God, segues are cool. The Mariners have a chance to add another fantastic minor league prospect with the number 3 pick in the 2025 MLB draft from the MLB draft lottery, where the Mariners, like you mentioned earlier, had very low odds to end up in the top. I believe it was the top 6 that they had very low odds to end up in, and they somehow managed to get pick number 3. It is pretty widely assumed that Ethan Holiday is going to go 1-1, the brother of Jackson Holiday, son of Matt Holiday. Tell me, Joe, about the outfielder from Texas A&M, who's probably going to go number 2, and then what is projected for the Mariners.
So if they were to get a position player at this pick, obviously Ethan Holiday is like the prize possession, but he's going 1-1. Like, he has to. It just feels that way. Like, unless who got the 1 pick? Was it the Nationals?
Yep.
And then who got the 2?
The Angels got 2.
Okay. Yeah, I think it makes sense for both. The Angels could go pitching, which could make this interesting. But regardless, the way that they draft very basically MLB ready college players, and the number 2 prospect on MLB pipeline is very much so that. Jace LaViolette, I don't know. Love Island, it sounds like what I'm saying. He's a 6'6" right fielder, left-handed bat, 230 out of Texas A&M. Okay? His hit tool is only 45, but his power tool is where he really stands out. A 65 power tool. With a frame that large, he is going to hit mammoth Texas wherever he goes. It would make sense in Seattle. A lefty swing in Seattle, hitting home runs through the hit it here windows. That makes a ton of sense to me, right? 55 run, 55 arm, 50 field, overall 60 grade. Like, he's a top 3 pick in this draft pretty consensusly. He is going to be a 4-year college athlete. By the time the draft rolls around, he's 21. So, like, yeah, he's going to be a guy that probably makes his MLB debut if the Angels pick him in 2025. Or 2026 for whatever team does draft him, because he's going to be ready. Like, this is a guy that is about as MLB ready as you can get as a college draft prospect. That's just the fact of the matter. I think the Mariners make a lot of sense here too. Of like, if they don't get production out of their DH in 2025, why not? Why not pull like an Evan Carter or like a Wyatt Langford type situation that the Rangers did? That's a possibility for them if Jace does fall there. But given that the Angels are picking second, I would expect him to go there. That feels like a more sound avenue. And even though we'll get the comments like, can he hit? Can they swing a bat? Why aren't we drafting players that can't swing a bat? The Mariners have drafted very well in the pitching department and have developed many of them into quality big leaguers and even quality minor leaguers that can be used as trades or just have shot up prospect rankings that maybe you didn't expect them to. The issue here is this is a top 3 pick. Like, this is a situation where this is going to be a bona fide stud as far as a draft prospect is concerned.
Going to be a top 100 prospect.
Yeah, like immediately plugged right into the top end of a already very good, maybe even top heavy Mariners prospect system. Honestly, you're looking at Cole Emerson, Cole Young, Harry Ford, Laz Montes, Valentin Celestin, like Tyler Locklear at your 6. He might be ahead of like Valentin, whoever you draft here. Like, he could end up in your top 4 very easily. Jamie Arnold, left-hander out of Florida State, is the number 3rd overall draft prospect on the board. A 60 grade fastball, 60 grade slider, 50 grade changeup with 55 grade control, overall grade 60. Anybody in the top 5, top 6, you're not getting below like a grade 60 overall out of 80. You know what I mean? He's a 6'1 lefty, only 188 pounds, little on the smaller frame. However, got a funky lower slot arm delivery likened to Chris Sale. Chris Sale's made a pretty damn good career out of being a funky lefty delivery with a devastating slider and a pretty damn good fastball, in my opinion. There's a bit of frailty concern there with that immediate comp, but Jamie Arnold makes a lot of sense for the Mariners at 3. He's also it's a college pitcher. They're not going prep arm here. I wouldn't expect. I don't think there's a prep arm available that would make sense for them to go here. It's either Jamie Arnold or the 4th ranked one is Tyler Bremner, who can pump up to 100 almost. Like, I'm more so fixated on Arnold, a lefty. I just, for whatever reason, that like intrigues me more. But they're going to go college arm at the 3 spot. Like, I'm like 90% certain that's where I feel like they go. It just makes sense for them. They're going to draft a guy that can come into the rotation in 2027, more than likely at the latest, to replace one of their pitchers that graduates to free agency. Like Gilbert, Kirby, they're not going to be on the team forever unless you resign them. But you can't resign both of them with this current front office. So what do? You draft a pitcher that's going to be able to replace them by 2027.
I think the reason that you're so into Arnold is because he's exactly what the Mariners don't have, and that is a left-handed pitcher. Now, with that being said, they have a type, and that is guys with really good stuff, and for the most part, other than Gerangelo Senja, are right-handed.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the only lefty that I can think of that is in the Mariners' top, like, 20 pitching prospects is Brandon Garcia, who's probably going to be a reliever. So, the Mariners have a type. They're very good at developing right-handed pitching, clearly. Not to say that they couldn't do it with a lefty. Like, I'm sure they could, but it's just, something to note there. Again, you said that people are going to complain that it's not a hitter, blah, blah, blah. Unfortunately, like, if you really look at the way the Mariners' cycle of drafts have gone, they drafted a ton of pitchers from, like, 2017, or 2018, 19, and 20. And then 21, I think, is when they stopped drafting pitchers, and 22 is when they started drafting offensive players.
21 was Ford, 22 was Cole, 23 was Emerson.
Right.
24 was pitchers again.
Right. And so they went 3 to 4 years drafting pitchers, 3 to 4 years drafting hitters, and now they're starting to draft pitchers again. Like, they're clearly trying to stock a farm system a very specific way where they bring up these guys who are going to hopefully make a name for themselves as pitchers. Logan Gilbert, George Kirby, Emerson Hancock. Like, those guys have done it. Brian Wu and Bryce Miller, while they weren't, first round picks, they were guys that kind of made a name for themselves in the minor league system, similar to how Logan Evans and Brandon Garcia and guys like that have, because frankly, again, the Mariners are good at this. The offensive side of things, I mean, that's why your top prospects in the system are all offensive players right now. That is intentional. And in probably about 3-4 years time, the top heavy part of it will be pitchers.
Yep.
Like, that's just how the circle of life works when it comes to draft prospects. And like you said, you have to find a way to replace the starting pitchers that are going to leave your organization. That's how teams like the Rays draft, and why they always seem chock full of really good young players. That's how they do it. And the Mariners have done it, and it's worked out really well for them. We haven't quite seen any of the guys they've drafted come up yet. I mean, Julio has been the biggest like success. Cal Raleigh's been a good success. Obviously, we're waiting on Cole Young, Colt Emerson, Laz, etc. But as those guys start to trickle in over the next few years, and as the pitchers start to trickle out, it's going to be this constantly revolving door of how the Mariners are going to go about their draft. So I think it's fine. I think this is exactly what they should do. And like you said, with these two starting pitchers, there's a lot to dream on with Arnold. There truly is.
Yeah.
Because if he could be anything like Chris Sale, you have a potential Hall of Fame starting pitcher. Now, that's probably where the comps stop. There is, like you said, a scenario where one of the two position players do fall to the Mariners. I find it unlikely, to say the least, but it is possible. It's also possible that when the draft comes around in July of next year, that this is, I mean, it's actually pretty much guaranteed that this is not like the top 10 that we see on the draft board right now is not the same. Guys are going to fall, guys are going to rise. Someone's going to have a crazy year where they developed into something that no one could have seen coming, and they're going to shoot up draft boards and find their way into the top 10, and the Mariners may see something they really like. I was really hoping today was going to be the day, man, that the Mariners finally made their first big move of the offseason. I really thought. It felt like it. Like there was actual buzz, and maybe that's just because we're scrounging for it. But alas, the winter meetings have come and gone, and the Mariners still have not done anything, so we're going to have to keep waiting. Thank you guys so much for watching episode 147 of the Hit It Here podcast, presented by Bet Online, the Reflect the Sun episode of the podcast, and go Mariners.